Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. And today it is story time, so kick back, grab a drink, and listen to this old boomer's tale. Now, of course, based on the thumbnail and title, you know we're going to be talking about Monster Hunter 3U today, but I want to share my story and my complete experiences with the game, especially coming back to it here in 2023, after I've also recently replayed 4U, GU, and Tri. Also because if you've hung around my stream chat at all, I've told the story of my first Monster Hunter game and how much I hated it, and that was 3U. So let's get into this. So story time. Back in 2011, when I was fresh out of high school, I was playing not Monster Hunter. I was mostly into Pokemon, Portal, Dead Space, Skyrim, and Dark Souls. So my brother was the one who actually got me to try 3U, and he sold it to me as, it's Dark Souls but only boss fights, and that really stuck with me. And I was thinking, okay, yeah, sounds good, I'll give that a try. And then he told me it was on the 3DS, and up until now, I've only played things like Metroid, Pokemon, Fire Emblem, and Castlevania on the handhelds. I didn't play much on the PSP besides emulators, and I had no idea what Monster Hunter was, never even heard of it. So I immediately thought it was going to be like a Zelda top-down style game. Thankfully, I was very surprised on how good it looked on the 3DS, and I was one of those lunatics that actually used 3D. But then I hit my first wall, starting 3U. Oh my god, the amount of time you have to spend gathering, finding materials, and doing all sorts of random chores with no actual quests or progression indicators, so confusing. And if you've never played a Monster Hunter game before, I don't see how anyone gets through the start of these games. There is no information on what to do, how to do it, how your weapons work, or anything. And the older titles get worse and worse with this. 5th gen's fine, they teach you and the new players all the stuff pretty well. Not 3U. So again, this is me right out of high school, and I've had no experience with this franchise. It was a rough fucking start. But my brother assured me, trust me, it gets good, you just have to deal with the beginning and try to learn what you can. Back then, I wasn't even a gunner. I was playing Lance, and oh boy did I have a rough ass time. Eventually, I persevered, and I got through some of the village quests eventually. I was not feeling this game though. I just didn't understand how to manage these clunky movements, sharpening, trying to find enough heals, learning monsters encounters. It was all just too much for me. Camera controls definitely didn't help at all. Now, I managed to get to Lagiacrystan village, eventually pounding my head up against the wall this entire time, which I believe is like 3-star village urgent, going into 4-star, something like that. And that guy hard walled me, even with Lance. I just didn't jive with the whole combat loop. My brother had helped me to try and get me some better gear by going through some of the hub quests with me for like 1 and 2-star, so I can make some better gear and just not die so goddamn fast. But ultimately, I felt useless as he was like HR 7 with almost G rank gear and just crushing monsters. So I was super deflated. I didn't enjoy any of my time with 3U, so I stopped, and that was my first experience with Monster Hunter, and it was just not for me. So of course, I would eventually return to Monster Hunter in 4U a few years later, and that time it stuck. But that's a story for a different time. But the point of that story was that I hated my first experience with Monster Hunter, and even though I love it now, I had never gone back to play 3U to give it another chance. Recently this year, or early last year, I don't really remember, I had gone back to play Tri because I wanted to experience the bowgun system with the parts and assembling weapons and all that stuff, and I really had fun messing around with that. And I really wish that system would return. I made a video on that if you want to check it out. But ultimately, I dropped Tri shortly after completing all the village quest lines with Ceadeus because the hub grind was absolutely atrocious. It's not like eQuest based, it's just hunting points based, and it was like 12 Rathians per hunter rank up, and I needed like 6 rank ups to get to high rank. I'm like, yeah, I'm not fighting a fucking 100 Rathians. And also the HP bloat was just atrocious for the hub. At least for gunners, I was always running out of ammo and materials in Tri. I did not have fun with Tri. The bowgun system's cool, but yeah, Tri was just like, I got through it. Anyway, fast forward to the whole point of the video, and all that was just storytime background. So I finally returned to 3U, playing on Citra with the juicy HD textures, and playing on a PS5 controller because I can't stand 3DS buttons even with the Circle Pad Pro. So I'm glad I can finally play with a nice controller, with nice graphics, for my big gorilla hands and my old boomer eyes. Going back to 3U with all my knowledge of Monster Hunter now, even after playing Tri, I felt like it would be a cakewalk, and I would just go in to experience all the fights that people hyped up, such as Lagiacrystan, Giganox, Stygian Zogre, Quirapeko, Dire Morales, all that stuff. I went in knowing that there's no item sets and having to manually restock ammo and items for each hunt, which is going to get on my nerves. I know, I accepted this fate, it's fine. But starting off in 3U was a breeze. Compared to Tri, oh my god. So like, I had previously done all the Moga quests in Try, so I kind of knew what I was supposed to do and what I needed to gather. But even after doing all the basic material farming and stuff, like, I just was ready to blow through all these low rank monsters, and I didn't realize how easy that was going to be. So I don't remember much of the 3U roster, and of course it's been like a decade since I even played it. So all the monsters actually felt kind of newish. Like, I didn't realize there was like an Arzuros was like the first thing you hunted in this, and like the Great Jaggy and the Lutroth all being staples, like things that we've murdered countless times. I just went in not knowing what to expect from older gen titles with like the monsters movesets and the hitboxes. So it was all kind of fresh to me, and I kind of went in cautiously. And then that cautious was quickly overridden as I realized that the extra 50 base defense that you get in 3U compared to Try meant I wasn't dying in 3 hits with low rank gunner armor, and I also had ample room to be greedy and just dump ammo into monsters, and yeah, it was a murder fest. The difference between Try and 3U was crazy. I think that whole paragraph I kind of fucked up, but I'm going with it. But also the thing that stood out immediately in 3U was that I was surprised at how good the hitboxes were, and the iframing felt amazing even here in low rank. Like, I was dodging through swipes and tail whips left and right. And I have recently replayed 4U, and I don't feel like I could do any of this shit in 4U. Like, the iframes just feel so dang generous here in 3U. And this persists through my entire playthrough. I was just really enjoying these frames. Plesioth tails, Nargacuga jumps, Diablo's hip checks, you name it. I was just starting off strong in low rank here in 3U. Like, it felt awesome. Now, even gunning in the early game wasn't a problem, because 3U is the last game where pellets were effective, and ours versus heavy bowgun carried pretty hard in low rank with the large pellet and normal clip sizes. Normal 3s were also a godsend for the water fights as the reduced projectile speed affected the ricochets, allowing them to actually hit multiple times in the water, where otherwise on land they're basically useless outside enormous targets such as Gen Moran. Small tangent, but 3U's raw MOs are so much weirder than other games. Like, normal 1s and 2s are point blank MO, you want to be like right up in the monster's face with those, and that's their actual critical distance. Pellets are your actual medium range MO, and thankfully monster magnet zones are actually really good in 3U, so pellets are actually very effective on certain monsters, and at worst they're about as effective as normals most of the time. But pellet 3 crit distance is crazy far, so there's a lot of positioning you need to do for each level of MO, which is very different. Pierce also isn't very prominent in low rank, as you don't really get a decent Pierce bowgun until high rank, but also Pierce just costs a lot. And Pierce acts differently here as well, at least as far as I can tell. It looks like the critical window is further out than in other games, so you have to actually be pretty far to use these. While this is close to 4U's Pierce, its actual range of effectiveness in 3U feels a lot smaller and further out, and because there's no trajectory skill to extend it, it's kind of weird. Now, out of that tangent, let's talk about some of the notable fights and features as I'm just plowing through 3U. Of course, the first thing we have to mention is going to be about water combat in general, and its specific monsters. I actually enjoyed water combat for the most part, and that's mostly due to me gunning, I'm sure, but it was a fun addition to the game, not so much for what it brings to combat, but for what it actually brought to the environments and the locales. Having rivers and lakes and maps that you could just jump into makes them feel so much more natural and large even. Flooded Forest is hands down my favorite map. It just looks so damn good, and looking at it in Rise it just brings a tear to my eye. There's not even a ton of water fights in the game, so it's not like a majority of the fights are taking place underwater. Like, out of the 44 monster roster, I think it's 44, here in 3U, I think only like 7 of them are like water fights. So it's a very small portion of the actual game. And honestly, there's only a few things I actually dislike about water combat, which is that, besides the fact that your swimming dashes have 0 iframes and dodging up and down is a chore, it's that every single monster in the water has the same general moveset. They all do the dashes back and forth, they have a turning pivot with like a little fin slap, and a tail whip. While monsters do have some of their own moves, they all share these and they use them a lot, so the fights kind of get really repetitive after a while. Like, everything from a Ludroth to a Ceadeus all has the same core moveset. But I do want to talk about some of the monsters specifically. Gobel, who is a relatively early rank monster, is actually very fun to fight. His whole body is a big weak spot, so you just effectively hit him anywhere and you're fine. He attacks like a shark too, so he's just all mouth, and if you can avoid being at his face, you're basically not going to have too much trouble with this guy. I do love the anglerfish design too, and he has a lot of attacks that use the lantern and the burrowing moves and his suction stuff that all revolve around this whole theme of being like tricksy, and he's just really well designed. I really like Gobel. Plesioth is actually super fucking fun to fight, both standard and green Plesioth. The moveset in water is actually pretty cool because he's got a really sick tail slap, and the water beams are really fun to dodge. Even on land, his hip checks don't have the insane hitbox from Freedom Unite, and his little tail whips were pretty clean to dodge through. And overall, just a really good time dealing with Plesioth, which is not something I think I've ever said before. Could we get this Plesioth back, please? This one is a delight. Now, Lagiacrys. This is where people's hate for water comes in. Dude, Lagiacrys is not a fun fight. I do prefer Ivory Lagiacrys and Generations Lagiacrys, which is basically Ivory. Here in 3U though, he only has like 6 attacks in the water, and 3 of them are charges. Either like a 1 charge, a 2 charge, or an electric charge. It's super annoying even as a gunner. That and paired with his double hip check and double electric hip check, which is damn near impossible to dodge properly, is just tedious. Like, you have to go up or down to dodge it, I get it, I know how to do it, but I don't know about you melee weapons, but range can only dodge up and down after you shoot, so you have to shoot and then dodge, so you really have to see it coming ahead of time to be able to have enough time to actually shoot, dodge, and evade. Also, rip if your clip is empty because you're just shit out of luck. Now, while Lagiacrys is super easy on land, he's just annoying in water. And I don't mind Ivory laggy, but even in G rank, Ivory is pretty stale on land alone. And while super threatening, he's also very easy if you just keep moving to the right because his lightning blasts only ever move left, which is odd. Anyway, I think Lagiacrys is super overrated. At least 3U Lagiacryses. I'll take Jen's version any day. I'm sure I'm going to get chastised a lot for that one. Now, Ceadeus and Goldbeard. These guys are actually fine. The arena and the soundtrack for the fight is top tier. But the fight itself, like I said, is just about like any other underwater fight. It dashes, it tail flicks, it has a beam, and that's pretty much the whole fight. It's not the worst giant monster fight, like it's not slow and tedious like Lao Shan Lung or the Morans, so I don't mind fighting it overall. It's just nothing super impressive. Now, with the water monsters out of the way, I want to talk about some of the other monster fights, and let's start with Gen Moran since I just brought him up. Holy poo, I hate this monster. Now, I actually like Daran Moran in 4U, but Gen is just awful. It's so much more tankier than Daran, it's got terrible hit zones, and everything about it is just harder to deal with compared to Daran. You can't stand on its back very much because the rocks still hit you, and you just get flown off randomly, and you have to break open those fin pockets to actually get access to an actual hit zone, and he just does not stop assaulting you. Just, oh my god, this fight is just so tedious. It takes so much longer than it needed to, and I just don't like it. So that's my Daran Moran rant, whatever. Next, Kurapeko. Goddamn, I love this bird. It is so much fun to fight. It's a hunting horn in monster form. It's got pretty light attacks and it's not super menacing on its own, but its signature ability to summon small and large monsters is hilarious and scary at the same time when he spawns a Devil Joe. Kurapeko can also buff the players as well as monsters with heal, attack buffs, and defense buffs. He can also sing a lullaby to put you and the monsters to sleep, and everything about this monster is great. Also, his gun honks when you shoot it, so that's mandatory S tier. Agnactor and Glacial Agnactor, the old clickety-clacks, awesome Leviathans, and we all knew that. But I've actually never fought Glacial Agnactor before, and I actually like it much more than his base counterpart. While it is an interesting mechanic that Agnactor has where he heats up his body parts when he uses fire attacks or touches lava, and you can bomb them as well, and the hit zones like are nice and juicy, they're awful when they're not heated up. And until that point, there's also no reason to damage him, so like, it's just kind of slow. Whereas Glacial Agnactor just has ice armor that you can break, and then you get full damage in after that. So it's kind of like opposites. Agnactor unfortunately does waste a lot of time though when it does its burrow attacks, both his forms. It will do this like dig and dash thing, but it repeat like 6 times, so you're just kind of running around waiting for it to come out of the ground before you can continue attacking. That's my only real gripe with Agnactor. Giganox. Oh, how could we not talk about Giganox? Yeah, he sucks. Kizu's better. Giganox sucks so bad they made his subspecies literally just Kizu. It's the same goddamn monster. Same attack, same everything, it just looks different. While I'm only partly joking, Giganox is interesting with its whole 2 heads and laying eggs and such. I just prefer Kizu 100% of the time. Gunner privileges, I'm sure, but Kizu is way more fun for me. I think Giganox's design is great, and I would love to see him return in the future with a new moveset. But comparing Giganox in 3U to Kizu in 4U, I'll take Kizu every single time. Zogre also was a very nice surprise. I'd forgotten how good Old World Zogre is, The fact that he can step into his kickflip and mix up his jumping lunge and his back slam is crazy and makes the fight way more tense than the newer games. 5th gen Zogre just kind of falls over and gets hit out of his charge forms immediately, so it's kind of a shame. Though I do have to say Stygian was kind of a letdown. While his Dracophage bugs are scary, that's pretty much it. He doesn't really do anything else new or exciting. 4U Stygian was way more fun than this one. And the last monster I want to talk about is Dire Morales, the almost last monster. I've never seen or fought this guy before, and he actually did kind of live up to the hype. While it is effectively just a Crimson Fatalis who just drops meteors and fireballs everywhere, the fight itself is way more interesting. First, because it's on water and land, and you can actually reach all his parts while you're swimming around the water, compared to a Fatalis where you basically only have access to his feet most of the time. The second reason why I really like Dire Morales is that he actually has hit zones that can be damaged, and you can break all these little swirling pools of energy to disrupt him, which is excellent because, again, unlike regular Fatalis, who have no good hit zones besides the face, Dire Morales can be hit almost anywhere. While Dire Morales isn't particularly complicated or difficult, it's at least more enjoyable than Old World Fatalis, and I will take him returning over Old World Fatalis any day. But we also just got, World Fatalis, which is a whole different story. Could you imagine what they would do with Dire Morales if he came back? Oh my god, that'd be crazy. So I finished up all of 3U's village and hub quests solo, and now I'm at to the point where I just need an HR grind to unlock things like Lucent Nargacuga and Abyssal Lagiacrus, whom I'm actually not looking forward to fighting. But at least I finished all the main urgents and all that stuff. I played through the game almost entirely as heavy bowgun, but I did use Pleziot's light bowgun for the rapid fire water, pretty much for Uragon, as Raw just does nothing to it. And I also had made Brachydios' bow to experience Slime, because Slime is just broken in 3U. But honestly, I don't think my kill times are particularly good with Brachy bow. Heavy bowgun just seemed to perform better, because heavy bowgun's heavy bowgun. I didn't actually use the Kelby bow, so I didn't get to experience that nonsense, but I'm not really sure I want to. Bow in 3U is kind of boring as you don't have power shot, so there's really nothing to follow up with, so all you do is shoot and release, which is kind of it's not even very strong or impactful. Not a big fan of bow in 3U, sadly. Light bowgun, I actually expected to use more, and I had made elemental bowguns for each of the element, thinking that I'm going to swap to that for certain monsters, but really I never found the need to do that outside of like Uragon, so I stuck with my heavy bowgun and raw emos for the most part. I didn't even have much issue with like ammo and craftable sustain, as the Granny in the port will sell you basically every ammo crafting material, which is amazing, and no other Monster Hunter in the game has done that. Why isn't that a thing in all subsequent games? Had that not been in the game, I don't know if I could have stuck around with gunning through all of 3U. It would have been such a chore to keep on top of farming materials. So, all that being said, I wanted to give 3U a proper review with the knowledge and experience I have now with all the Monster Hunter franchises. So Monster Hunter 3U is still an excellent Monster Hunter game. Being over a decade old title from the 3DS, it definitely does show its age though, with the lack of features and also the monster AI not being super sophisticated. While I enjoyed my playthrough very, very much, I absolutely would recommend any Monster Hunter fan to play it and experience it, but I don't think it holds up as well as some of the older titles. Going back into 3U, water combat was always on your mind because that's the main feature and gimmick of this title. But honestly, like I said, not a lot of time was spent in the water. It's really not as prominent as you might expect, because that's literally all you hear when people talk about 3U is water combat, and it's not a big deal. And personally, I enjoyed water combat because I'm a gunner, and water combat doesn't affect my gameplay. But again, I totally see why people don't care for it, as the camera controls are really bad in 3U, but more importantly, you can't really dodge up or down in a three-dimensional space in the middle of combat, which is what gets people hit so often. Also, there's like no iframes in the water, so you're constantly getting hit. And when you put these things together, I can just see why the frustration comes in. I still love what water brought to the environment and would love to see it return, because I'm sure water controls and combat could get fleshed out more and just be smoother in the future, and just be more tolerable. Most people who say they don't want water combat to return think it will return as it was in 3U, and they just remember how awful it felt. But I don't see it that way, and you shouldn't either. I see the idea being great, but the implementation was kind of poor or limited based on the hardware. But that can always be improved. There's no reason why water combat can't be fluid, Outside the water combat though, 3U doesn't actually boast too many features. Moga Woods, while a cool exploration area you can do to get village points and trade-ins, is pretty underwhelming. It's very limited on what can actually spawn there and what you can do, and I think all the subsequent games that did their free zones, they're just better. 4U had expeditions in the Everwoods, which is excellent. GU actually didn't have a free zone, but World had guided lands and Rise has its own expeditions. And while that was obviously a first implementation, and it being an older game, I don't fault it at all. I just wouldn't claim this is a feature that is unique to 3U and something worth coming back to experience, unlike the water combat, which is very unique. And as I mentioned before, monster AI isn't particularly impressive or dangerous. While some monsters do have some unique moves and patterns, such as Nargacugas and Sinogres and the Wrath families even, most of the other monsters just kind of cycle through the same 4 attacks, and it's pretty easy to bait certain moves such as tailspins and charges. Again, this is one of those things where, like, yeah, it's an old game, the AI and the movesets aren't super complex, which is understandable, but given our current year and where we have access to so many Monster Hunter games to play, I just can't see 3U offering very many memorable and amazing fights to warrant players to keep playing after they've completed the port quest and such, or experienced Dire Morales. Especially when you have 4U on the same hardware, which in my opinion just feels and plays significantly better than 3U in pretty much all regards. The step up is just insane. So overall, again, 3U is still an excellent game. It holds up fine, but as a Monster Hunter title goes, I don't think I'd rate this one very high. I'd probably put 4U at the top, then Iceborne, then GU, then 3U. So it's like 4th place for me right now, if I don't count base games such as World and Generations and Tri. It's fine, but I'd probably go back and replay those other 3 titles before I go back and play 3U again. I'm still going to continue playing 3U with friends and stuff to do hub quests and grind my HR when I can so I can experience Abyssal Lagiacrus, but it's definitely going to be on the back burner for now. But that's going to be all for me. Thank you all for listening for my story times and stuff, and thank you to my Patreon members. I appreciate y'all. If anyone wants to talk shop about Monster Hunter or gaming in general, feel free to join my Discord in the description below. But thanks and good luck out there, hunters.